Welcome to the Hunt, Fish, Travel podcast, the first and longest running female hosted hunting podcast. When she's not gearing up for turkey season, she's helping you navigate your trip of a lifetime. And now, here's your hostess, Carrie Zilka.
Welcome to the Hunt, Fish, Travel podcast. I am your hostess, Carrie Z. This week, we are talking to Jordan Christensen from The Draw. He stops by for a super extra long episode. Normally, I'd break this into 2 or 3 parts to keep it under 30 minutes and keep the algorithm happy, but the information imparted was so intertwined, there was just no way I could break it apart. So, go work out for an hour and a half, go fishing for an hour and a half, go do some turkey scouting for an hour and a half, and listen to this information-packed episode. Just in case you missed it, I'll be exhibiting at the 2023 Open Season Sportsman's Expo at the beautiful Kalahari Resort and Convention Center in the Wisconsin Dells, March 24th through the 26th, 2023. My show has been around for over a decade, and it's geared towards helping you plan your hunting or fishing trip of a lifetime. Whether it's lake trout fishing in Manitowoc, fishing for walleyes in Lake of the Woods, Minnesota, bow fishing in Missouri, duck hunting in Michigan, elk hunting in Colorado, whatever, along with some how-to and gear episodes thrown in there for good measure. I'm sure I have an episode that will tickle your fancy. So, if you're in the Wisconsin area or if you live anywhere within driving distance of the Wisconsin Dells, be sure to stop by booth 1518. You can buy some merch, listen to some excerpts of some past episodes, and you can tell me what your dream outdoor adventure is and give me an idea for a future episode. So, again, that is March 24th through the 26th, 2023 Open Season Sportsman's Expo at the Kalahari Resort and Convention. I hope to see you there. This episode is brought to you by Spy Point Trail Cameras. I've been trying to keep up with Trail Cam Tuesday, but apparently all I have are possums and does and blackbirds and raccoons on my property that I lease, which I'm giving up. So it'll be interesting to put up some trail cameras in public hunting land and see what I can come up with there. And it's also brought to you by Montana Decoy, of course. I don't use any other decoys. They are proven, tried and proven, and they're light, and they fold up right into my pack, and they're awesome. So go check out Montana Decoy. All right, enough of business. Let's head into the show.
This is Jordan.
Hey, Jordan, it's Carrie. How are you?
Good. How are you, Carrie?
I am excellent. You live in Pennsylvania now, right? Is that what your bio said, I think? Or wait.
No.
No, Nebraska.
I did live in Nebraska for a while, but New Mexico. We're down in southern New Mexico.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I did bounce around quite a bit for a while, so that's understandable. But maybe that's why I'm sitting in the chair I am today. I couldn't sit in one place for very long.
You know what, though? That's okay, because it's all about following your dreams, and you obviously did, which is fabulous.
Yeah. I can barely read, so if this doesn't work out, I don't know what we're gonna do. I'm gonna be in a real mess.
Right. It's too funny. All right, well, we can jump right into it. Let's see. So and just kind of looking at the different stuff that you guys got going on, you have so much going on. So narrowing it down to one subject, obviously, like I said, it's just about damn impossible. So if you don't mind, I'd like to center this episode, maybe like the top 3 tips that you would suggest to people who are, like me, who live in Wisconsin, who have no idea that you have to draw tags out west. The concept is utterly foreign to me, who can buy everything over the counter. So I think it would be really advantageous to just kind of go over some of the top tips that you might give to people.
I agree. Even with an hour, it ends up too broad and it gets very muddy. But if you kind of narrow it down a little bit, I think that there'll be some value, at least, that guys can kind of walk away with. And I mean, sure, we can. I've got an idea of kind of how I'll navigate that we can cover some pretty cool ground with guys that if they even wanted to do it themselves, like maybe after an hour of this, they'll have a little more confidence that they could, without misunderstanding what they're doing or what. I think so many guys just throw a handful of darts at the wall every year and hope a hunt falls out, and it's not.
Real.
Yeah, and even with this hour, I'll bet we can kind of get guys past that. Like
that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then too, if you wouldn't mind, since it is like the bigger 70% of my show is really kind of the logistics of planning, or like you said, choosing a trip to go on, choosing a hunting or fishing trip to go on, and some of the logistics behind that, because let's face it, we all spend more time planning than hunting and fishing. So
yeah,
I think that'll work really well.
So that they just can, it's a turn, they don't have to worry about it, and it's just happening.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
Yep.
All right, well, so I'm actually going to read the Hunt, Fish, Travel intro, but I think I'm also going to cross-post this onto the Bowcast Archery Podcast, because I do have so many Western listeners over there, and bow hunting and archery, obviously, freaks, I'll just read the Hunt, Fish, Travel intro, and then I'll just cut and paste later. So...
Perfect.
All right. Yep. Welcome to the Hunt, Fish, Travel Podcast. I am your hostess, Carrie Z. I am really excited about this episode. I know I say that every week, and I know I say that every week, but I really am, because we're about to talk to a guy who's very prolific in the outdoor industry. He's got his own podcast. He's a fellow military veteran. He lives out west, and he's literally living the dream that all of us just dream about. So I'd like to introduce Jordan Christensen. Now I gotta edit that out. Jordan Christensen to the show from The Draw.
Thank you very much, Mary. Yeah. Well, I'm excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation for sure.
Yeah, why don't you tell the listeners? So you can go to thedraw.com and look at his bio, but why don't you kind of give them a brief overview of... I can't believe you narrowed all this stuff down into one paragraph on your website. It's nuts, the amount of stuff that you've done.
Yeah, it's been I say all the time, like, God has a plan for everybody, and in the middle of what this has become, I don't think I could have ever dreamed up that this was what he was preparing me for. It was just, I was just having fun. I was just, kind of doing what a lot of guys do, I think, in their 20s and early 30s, and just the guys that have a passion for it. I was just chasing any and every avenue I could to kind of just be in the middle of the hunting industry, and I was going about it maybe in a different way, that maybe even like the idea of being an industry guy wasn't even the goal. It was just what I loved, and so kind of how even a quick recap, like a cool moment for me is like, so I've got two brothers, and I'm very lucky. I talk to each of them every day, and they talk to each other every day, and they're 8 and 9 years older than me. And so those two guys have been like my crystal ball my whole life. I could always see what was coming from a young age, and one of the conclusions I came to when I was a younger teenager is that I really wanted to do something awesome with hunting, something different than anybody I grew up in a town of like 200 people in central Utah, and so I just watched all the old hunting DVDs. I wanted to do something cool, and I knew if I didn't do it, prior to college, I knew even that young that I was going to enlist in the military, and I knew I wanted to do something before all of that, because as soon as that all happened and I graduated high school and whatnot, then things were going to really get busy for me, and the likelihood was going to be a lot less. So I started pushing shopping carts at the local Kmart, and I was a herdsman for the Cattlemen's Association, and just anything I could. And I saved up all my money. In the first week I went, the first week of high school, my senior year, I was actually in the Northwest Territories, about 30 miles inside the Arctic Circle, and I went on a caribou hunt. And it was brutal. Like, there was no caribou. Nobody, like, I went a couple of the 5 days without even seeing a single caribou. But when the smoke cleared, I had 2 tags, and I could have shot 2, I guess, but I shot 1 caribou on the 4th day. and it was like this extremely life-altering event for me. And I met guides, full-time guides, for the first time, and I just like I feel like there was a passion there always, but something truly incredible, like a very turning point. That even right then, just enlisted for the military. I knew as soon as I was done with the military that something was going to be. I wanted to be more, and I wanted to do this all the time in some way or the other. So fast forward, in the midst of the military, I ended up doing an apprenticeship and learned how to do taxidermy. That was a big thing for me as well. I got done with the military, ended up in southern New Mexico, and we hunt oryx. It's a gemsbuck from Africa, but they have a free-ranging herd of oryx in New Mexico that they do these once-in-a-lifetime hunts. And they send guys in one way and they bring them out one way on, like, at the time, there was 12 hunts a year with like 110 hunters per hunt that could bring up to 3 buddies with them per hunt. So I come home, I get back from overseas, I moved to New Mexico, and God puts the right people in your life at the right times. And I meet this guy who at the time is selling home loans for Wells Fargo and part-time working at White Sands as a hunt coordinator. To this day, Gilbert is still one of our team members. He's one of my closest friends, and he convinces me, go set up like a little satellite shop for your taxidermy business outside the gate where the hunters go in and where they come out, and, you know, shake your tin cup and see if you'll drum up some work. Well, 8 years of that, there was very few hunts that I missed. And again, unbeknownst to me, I'm building this like insane network of people because it's fairly expensive tag, especially for non-residents, and it's once in a lifetime. So it's new people all the time coming in, just hundreds and hundreds a year that I'm meeting. And I start meeting a lot of outfitters. I start meeting a lot of guides, and I start building relationships. And that's where within about 2 years, I started guiding. And I found that the easiest place to sell taxidermy work was at a bloody tailgate. So I found as many of those as I could, and I would go guide. And I started, and I think there was even a negative connotation about guiding for me as I grew up, in Utah and around it a little bit. And the what I missed that I know now, and why I'm so glad that I kind of took that plunge and went down that path, is just like the opportunities to build relationships that exist within in guiding are second to none. Like you're obviously in the truck or on a hunt with somebody who's made a lot of great decisions in their life and has led them down a path that they're capable of going on these hunts, whether the cost of the tag or the hunt itself is expensive. Like, as we all know, if you do much of it, it cranks up pretty quick. And yet there you are 5 days, building a relationship and have a common goal, and you're accomplishing that goal, if God willing. And you really can like solidify some amazing relationships with amazing people, from all walks of life. So I really grabbed hold of that and had some good mentors that kind of helped me navigate in the early years. And eventually, probably there was about a 4 or 5 year run where I was guiding. The goal was to be guiding about 200 days a year. I wanted to be in the truck with somebody, or at least on the books. If we got done day one, then great. But I wanted to be on the books for about 200 days a year, whether that was in Arizona or Utah, or it was in Texas or wherever, just anywhere that I could be with somebody in a truck and trying to be successful. That's what I wanted to do. And about the time that was, in all seriousness, about the time it was even getting old, if that sounds a little crazy, like I was getting to be 30, I was tired. I ended up having a baby boy, and my whole life changes. Like, all my goals change, all of my drive, all of what matters completely just comes to an absolute 90-degree turn for me in my life. And and as again, unbeknownst to me, like I never dreamed up of doing what I do now, which has at that time I start looking for something a little bit more legitimate. I end up in an incredible position through different relationships that I had, that I got offered a job at Cabelas at their headquarters in Nebraska. And what the job was, it was a tags consultant and someone who helps people navigate all the different point systems and all the different draw processes all across the country. And again, just funny looking back, it always is to me, like my dad was visionary. I think part of it growing up in Utah, part of it is he was a rather engaged hunter himself, that he got me started in point systems when I was really young, back when I didn't have any money to do any of it, but he could see I loved it. So he started investing. And even now I still, unfortunately, I mean, sheep tags are very hard to get a hold of. I've got places that I have over 20 points in because of kind of his vision and foresight of like, this is what it's going to take for him to ever get to do some of these goals. So I've been playing the game for a long time, not on the level I am now, but pretty broad for who I was and what I was doing. And next thing I know, now instead of one guy every 5 days that I'm helping on a hunt, I've got 5 guys a day, 10 guys a day that I'm able to coach and show them what I've learned all over these years, and still be a dad and be a husband, right? And go home at night and have, which oddly enough in the hunting industry is hard to find. Like it's hard to have a job that allows you to be that guy, and be right in the middle of it, and yet still be home at night and being that guy as well. And I just I never dreamed it up. I would have never thought about it even 2 years before that or a year before that. And I found absolutely a passion that has truly grown even since then. The more I learn about the applications, I call it the game. The more I play the game, the more I learn about the game, the more I love the game. And watching now in this chair with, a few thousand guys that we're working with currently, and seeing their success and playing a small part in just helping coach them through and navigate some of the complexities of each of these draws has become extremely rewarding. And some of these guys are coming back with these just unbelievable, trophies with, very old animals, big, huge, all these different things. But watching the guy that, it looked untouchable to him. It looked unobtainable or too complex. And within one phone call, fast forward a year or two later, and he's sending me a picture of just, for him at least, a nice representation of the animal, and the amount of excitement that he's got, even though maybe he posted on some forum or some social media page and maybe some guys throw stones. Him personally, he loved it, and I geek out completely. It's one of the coolest things is to take something that somebody believes is just not possible and then show them truly how easy it is, and kind of take them by the hand. And I am finding a ton of satisfaction. It's very rewarding to be just say a small piece of the puzzle in what ends up being lots of success for guys and stuff that maybe they didn't think was possible prior to picking up the phone and calling us. And so that's kind of a nutshell of really the last 15, 18 years of my life. And I feel like we're just getting started, honestly. It's so
crazy.
Fun.
Most of us can sum up our journey in 2 minutes, maybe. The amount of stuff that you cram. I mean, it's crazy. And it's really impressive and exciting.
It's like every time I tell that story, if I'm doing seminars or I'm doing stuff it's the most, it reminds, it's the most humbling thing to think back, gosh, I was just having fun, and yet here I sit, and it is I love it. I know, especially because I talk to so many guys on the phone, I am the luckiest guy that I know because I cannot wait to get to this desk every day. Like, it is an absolute passion. And maybe more importantly than that, like, I am so humbled by like the team that I've been able to build, like Jared and Casey, and even our girls, Pat and Hannah and Caleb, and like the passion is definitely well past me. Jason, who owns the company with me, is like his intellect is like few people I've ever met in my life, and he's not as much customer facing, but his vision and ideas and how the processes, like every piece of the puzzle is so humbling to be a part of it all. It's really, I say a lot of times, like, the draw is definitely a manifestation of 20 years of networking that I finally figured out with Jason's help how to put it all in one place. And the amount of people we're helping now is tenfold what I ever thought it was going to be possible. When I left Cabelas, like, I really didn't think that was something that would ever happen. But as the world knows, Bass Pro buys Cabelas, tons of things change. Mm-hmm. And even as hard as that pill was to swallow, again, God has a plan for everybody. I would have bet you my house that my plan was to be 30 years in corporate America in that job. I loved it. I didn't want to leave. And then 4 years later, they throw us a curveball. And now 5 years into owning the draw, I can't imagine not it being that. Like, there was always something better coming down the pipeline, even though I didn't have enough, capacity to see it. There was always something better coming down the pipeline.
That's super cool. So explain to me what the draw actually is. The premise of the company obviously has to do with drawing tags, but tell me, as someone who would probably never even think that I had to apply mm-hmm. for lotteries or put in for draws, explain to me what exactly it is.
So what the whole kind of basis of the company is it's really a service that we offer more than I would even argue more than the consulting of it. But what it boils down to is that I think, as just a very generic statement, like, people have hunting goals, right? And some of those goals start to transcend, especially because hunting is such a progressive sport. People, whether it's looking for something older age class than they've harvested in the past, or seeing a new ecosystem, or targeting a new species, there seems to be inevitably for lots of folks a progression. And so when that progression starts to turn past hunting whitetails, let's say in the Midwest or the East Coast, and we start looking out west at some of the different opportunities at the mule deer or the antelope or the elk or sheep or moose or goats or whatever it may be, then immediately a lot of folks run into some brick walls, or it feels like brick walls, of these draw processes that exist. And every state out west has one, and every single state is different. Some of them have some similarities, but at the end of the day, if you really get down into the details and get to a point where you can expect success, if you will, in those draw processes, then they really are all different. And so what our goal is to just ask enough questions when guys call in to start really digging through what the details of those dreams or those goals are, and whether it's new ecosystems or a new species. How often is this a once in a lifetime trip that we're trying to put together, check the box, if you will, and then move on? Or is it like, for a lot of guys right now, like, there's a desire to get into elk hunting. So it's not necessarily just a one-off. Like, we're looking to do this regularly, and we get all the answers to, it's literally like, I actually, for my new consultants, literally wrote it all down a couple years ago so that they didn't miss one. And it's like 2 pages of questions. A normal initial consultation for us should take minimum of 45 minutes, probably an hour. Like we want as much detail as we can about what the goal is, what they're losing sleep over. And then based on those answers, then we can start helping them decide which states make the most sense to invest their money in and give some sort of clarity to what to expect. Like, how long is this process going to take? Because every state's different. And that's like, even in a nutshell, like if guys are looking for like sooner than later, and maybe they're not looking for the biggest animals in the country, but it's like, no, I would really like to just experience this, but I'm not going to wait 20 years for that to come to, like, where should I go that I can go sooner than later? And so we call those like short-term goal states. And the reason they're short-term goal states doesn't necessarily have anything to do with trophy quality as a general rule, as much as it's how the state processes their draw. And therein lies the opportunities. So states like Montana and Wyoming and Colorado and South Dakota and Kansas, like these are places that literally with like maybe 1 year to, let's say, under 5 years, 0 to 5 years, like if you jump through the hoops that they've put in front of us, you can you would end up in spots where you had 100% chance of drawing the following year that you submit the application. And so for a lot of folks, those states make a lot of sense. Not only are they short-term goals, like they don't take 20 years to accomplish, but we can also like forecast. We can also plan. We can, if, we work for some company that requires at the beginning of the year for us to schedule time off and things of that nature, then those states, therein lies those opportunities. We can know with confidence you're going to draw when we submit this application. So now we can start planning way out in front, and whether it's DIY or they want to go guided or whatever their goal is, that's what we help them navigate. And then on the flip side of that, states like Utah, Nevada, and Arizona, obviously amazing hunting in these states, but the draw processes that they have really lend themselves most of the time, maybe not all the time, but often to like more of a long-term goal kind of state. Like this is, yes, it's where some of the very best hunting is, but because of the draw processes, like we should prepare ourselves for a very long-term kind of commitment in order to be successful outside of a lightning strike happening, which definitely does every year, but we don't go into those states planning on hunting them. We go in because we're choosing to gamble, if you will, for hunting because it's the best. You can't win if you don't play, but I would argue so many of the guys that we work with, especially as they get started in the program, but those states definitely don't line up with what their goals are. And yet I would definitely say two of the most popular states that people start with on their own, like, is Utah and Arizona, but they don't understand that, okay, so be it. It's great hunting in there, but we shouldn't expect to draw for 15, 20 years, and even in some of the subpar units. That's just
really
the nature of their draw process. So now, if you end up like me and you are completely immature and reckless about how much money you spend on all of this stuff, and if my wife ever finds out how crazy I am about the game, then you're just like, well, whatever. Like, I can't win if I don't play it. Like, mindlessly. But it's not the right plan for, like, almost anybody, right? Especially just getting started. Like, no different than any goal. We want to have some closure. We want to set goals and accomplish them. And there are places that we can do that, and we can do it in a fairly short amount of time. And then maybe this is even a nice little, like, add this into the why. Why do guys do this? Why not just buy a tag and go? A lot of it really boils down to, like, a cost versus value thing. Like, I'll use New Mexico as an example. We have lots of guys who come hunting elk in New Mexico every year, and there's a program in New Mexico they call the E+ program. And what that is these very small landowners are capable of submitting documentation to the state, and they're able to receive an elk tag from the state of New Mexico that they're able to sell. They can sell that elk authorization is what they call it. to whoever would like to buy it. And when that person buys it, they can choose to hunt either the archery season or the muzzleloader season or the rifle season in that unit. And then they activate the tag, and that tag is for all of the same dirt, same season dates, just like you drew the tag, right? Like, it's identical in every single way, except one of them you can buy over the counter, and one of them, or not over the counter necessarily, but like you can just buy it from a landowner. And the other one we draw. So a very popular unit in New Mexico would be like Unit 34, and that's kind of a middle of the road as far as price point goes. Tons of elk on Unit 34, definitely some big bulls, but maybe not as consistent as some of the other units in the state. Right now, if you wanted to buy that tag and just go hunting, we usually get quite a few of them a year, and they're like $9,000 or $10,000, right? Versus if you draw the exact same tag, same dirt, same season date, same everything, you pay the state of New Mexico $760, and you're going elk hunting. And the $9,000 or $10,000, that does not include a guide. That is just the tag. If you want a guide on top of it, plan on, depending on who you're going with, $5,500 to $6,500 for a 5-day guided hunt. So why do I have guys every year that are buying those tags, but they're not dumb guys. They still roll the dice because let's say they go for 10 years in a row and they draw that tag twice in a 10-year period. I mean, that's to them, maybe not to me because I would never do that, but to them, they just saved $20,000 at least over the course of the years. And so even the guys who are buying still roll the dice and try and draw because of how much cost versus value there is if on the off chance that they draw. So, even like we talked about as we were getting on the call here is, as far as like what helps guys understand like where, if they're going to do it themselves, like where a jumping off point is, I would argue most guys should be focused on states like Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, and Kansas and South Dakota as like these states and the way their draw process works will get you to a finish line that you can count on much sooner than what looks very appealing in Arizona and Nevada and Utah. Those are very long-term commitments and most guys just don't understand what they're saying yes to and what they're spending their money on.
My head hurts, dude. All this stuff is so complex. I'm like trying to absorb. No, it was very good.
Hopefully it's like simple, right? Like just stick here, like rewind the podcast.
Yeah.
Listen to me again, like these states don't deviate outside of this plan unless again, like you get bit by the bug of the game. It's like, I can't win if I don't play, and then so be it. But if we stick with those states, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, Kansas, and South Dakota, we can go often, and the overall cost versus value is like tenfold compared to what we find in some of the more, the big three, I call them, like Arizona, Nevada, and Utah, Arizona, Nevada.
Yeah.
New Mexico is like an outlier, right? Like New Mexico, there's a couple places like this. New Mexico doesn't have a point system. It's just a random draw every year, and at face value, I think it turns guys off. And if you're the type of guy that has to have things scheduled, a year in advance, 2 years in advance, like New Mexico may not work out very well for you because you essentially, if we draw New Mexico, we get surprised by that tag every time. There's no way to forecast it. It's just a luck of the draw. But the way that New Mexico allocates their draws as far as residents and non-residents and the amount of tags that are being issued, really, like the best way I could put it is something to like this effect. Like those draw processes in Arizona and Nevada and Utah, like best case scenario, all three of them combined, I'm going to draw, call it 15 to 20 elk tags a year in all three states combined, right? Wyoming, I'm gonna send 40 or 50 guys a year to Wyoming because they have enough points and they're choosing to go to Wyoming. Colorado, probably not quite as many. The number of points, and maybe we're talking more specifically elk here, the number of points it takes to draw what I would feel comfortable telling somebody to drive halfway across the country to go do is probably a little less. So I'm probably clear down into like 15 to 20 guys a year in Colorado that are opting in and going. Whereas like when the smoke clears on the New Mexico draw, like we're very much expecting to draw, anywhere from 80 to 100 elk tags a year just in New Mexico for guys who rolled the dice on it. And that number keeps going up every year for us. Like so in the big picture of things, it's an aggressive application for sure, because it is a roll of the dice. It's definitely, in every sense of the word, we're gambling for hunting. But because of the draw process and how they allocate the tags and all things considered, that we draw a ton of tags in New Mexico, and you're not behind some sort of point curve. So if getting surprised by a tag is okay, then and exciting, then it's by far the most viable option, especially for guys that maybe need another point or two to get to some hunt that they've decided that they would like to go to. And we have lots of guys every year that, because of the draw odds and all things, and even like maybe more specifically with New Mexico, like one of them that really stands out, if you will, is so New Mexico, different than most of these states, has like what they call a guided pool. And they actually set aside 10% of all the tags that they're going to issue to guys who know that they're going to go guided to some extent. And you put in with an outfitter code. What that process usually entails is you pick your outfitter and you call him up and talk to him, and he sounds great and everything looks like it's going to work out. And then he'll want some sort of deposit. Call it $500, $1,000, whatever it is. And when you do that with him, then he'll give you his outfitter code to apply with. And that money that you spent goes towards your hunt, whatever you decide to do when you draw. But without a point system in place, it's not all the time, but you definitely can see where there could be this blister that happens, right? Mm-hmm. Guys are like, man,
sure.
I gave you $500 4 years ago, and I still haven't drawn anything. And it becomes almost like, say, just a pressure point that guys don't understand is coming. Like, they're excited. They want to go elk hunting. Let's put in with the outfitter. It's going to increase our odds, all these different things. What we do at the draw that's different is the only time we're charging guys anything is if we're submitting applications. So they pay us for, let's say, the New Mexico elk application, and that's it. No problem. One state, one species, that's fine. And we get a huge influx of guys that are doing this leading up to the New Mexico deadline, because instead of paying $500 for the outfitter code, you just simply pay it. Let us submit the application. We have an outfitter code. We get you in the guided pool, and then you're not married to that outfit that we're actually putting you in with. We have what's called a transfer document that when you draw the tag, now we still have all options on the table. The only option we don't have is that you've got to go with somebody that's a licensed guide. And then what that can even entail, and this is probably the program that gets a ton of guys on the phone with us, is they, by law, in that guided program, you are required to be with a guide for 2 days, a minimum of 2 days in the field. And as soon as you've accomplished that, then you're free to hunt however you would like within the season dates and within the unit that you've drawn. And so instead of biting off a $5,500 to $6,500 elk hunt, usually, not uncommon for two guys to want to apply together. Like, I have outfits that we work with that will accommodate those 2-day guide deals for, as low as like $1,500. You're kind of more paying for the drawing odds than you are like a professional guide, because the guide you're going to get is just a licensed guide. Could be an 18-year-old kid that's never been on the unit. Could be a 45-year-old guy that used to guide and now he plumbs full-time or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Like, there's no rhyme or reason on the You're not necessarily getting guided. You're sufficing the legalities within the law that says you have to be guided for 2 days. And so but it also can increase your drawing odds, not on every unit, but in lots of cases, you could go from a 5% chance of drawing the tag to a 30% chance of drawing the tag in that guided pool. So if the idea of spending call it $1,500 on to have somebody there with you for 2 days that makes it legal is worth, obviously, like even the example we gave earlier, versus $10,000 for a landowner permit. Like all of a sudden these numbers start to make a lot more sense, that it's like, yeah, let's be in the guided pool. So be it. We're going to have somebody tagging along with us for 2 days, but then we're off and running, and the guys I work with, one of my favorite things is that even the outfitter like hangs a carrot in front of those younger guides or the 2 day guides and just says, if you're successful in that first 2 days, like they get a bump in pay from the outfitter. So like those guys do hit the ground running. They may not be the most experienced. They may not be, anybody that's a professional guide not signing up for a 2 day guide gig. They're signing up for a full 5 day. They're going to make, that's how they pay their bills, right? Like they're there, but there is incentive for those guys to help and try their best to be successful during and hopefully get you off and running in the right direction. And I would say like that one is, we're already starting, right? Like that deadline, March 22nd this year, like the phone's really starting to light up for guys that have maybe seen us somewhere else or aware of that program and are like, yeah, get me in that. I want to be in that, because cost versus value is like tenfold, right? It's such a better deal. And at the end of the day, they draw some elite tag and they decide they want to go fully guided. So be it. The best part is they're not married to one specific outfit. Once they draw the tag, we start looking at who the best fit is, like who's got the track record, whether it's a 2 day deal or a fully guided deal. We're going to kind of customize. And the other thing is, if they have a buddy or some relationship already that they know who they want to go with, so be it. Like there's no requirement that anything has to happen with somebody that we work with at the draw. It's just, we're in New Mexico. We know a lot of people. Like we can usually, we're as involved as guys would like us to be. It's probably the best way of putting it.
Well, and you guys on the website, you have listed some outfitters. I'm assuming that you've been with them, that you've vetted them, because for me, not knowing how the process works, if I were just to go onto your website and I would look and I'd be like, oh, North American big game hunting, oh, limited entry Dall sheep hunting, let's check this out. Okay, here's the information. I'm like, well, who is this outfitter? I can't look at reviews. I can't look them up on Google. I can't find them on Facebook, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm assuming that's because you vetted them already.
It's a trick. It's to make you call us.
I knew it. I knew it. Yeah. Damn you guys.
Give them, what's the marketing thing? Like give them 90%, but make them call for the last 10%.
Oh my God, the hunting version of clickbait.
Yeah, I tell you. And so, like total transparency, the goal is to, yes, we want boots on the ground. It's very important to us to have boots on the ground, and even like I just feel like when I'm like describing a hunt to a guy, even being able to tell him what it looks like when you drive into camp or drive into a lodge or whatever it is, like even just like having that one experience can like make a huge difference in the amount like of what you know about it. Let's use one example that you just threw out there, like the Dall sheep in Alaska, right? Like that's a real tough tag to draw. I try every year, have for a long time. So has my partner. It never has come to fruition with us, but this is where I would even kind of like lean back on more than even just the history of the draw in the 5 years that we've existed is that half of this team were Cabelas consultants. Frank was 15 years international category manager. Caleb was what we called the avid manager for almost 8 years. The volume of guys that were coming through Cabelas was unbelievable, and it just required you to build a network of guys all over the world. I don't know another scenario that would lend itself to even having an opportunity to building a network quite that vast. And so there are some even in our offering that for one reason or another, someone in this office hasn't actually done that hunt, but we have a long track record with other clients, and if references are required, then great. Like we've had, that's why they're there, is we've got either boots on the ground or it's something like that as an example that, yeah, I've never drawn that tag. It's very hard to draw, but we've drawn it probably 6 or 8 times, and we have guys who've gone, and we've got, lots of, even the other day I was looking at the one you're looking at, the guy who drew and went is on the cover of Eastman's Journal with this giant freaking ram that he killed. And, Josh, and that therein lies, if the references are needed, Josh, a great friend. I've known him a long time. I text him and I'm like, hey, heads up, I got somebody that wants to talk to you about that hunt. Do you mind taking 5 minutes with them? 99% of the time I get a yes on that, and then the references can go, but it's definitely the clickbait, like 90-10, right? You got to call us. Like if it looks interesting enough, call us so that we can. And the other thing is, I think we can get in front of, like, we can really nail down the details. Like we can, with a 10-minute conversation, we're able to articulate it a whole lot better than any write-up would be capable of, and truly make sure it's a good fit, right? Like it's fun to get lost in the picture sometimes, but there's so many styles of elk hunting and destinations and how guys are going about it. Like elk is an example. Like there couldn't be a broader topic in North America than elk hunting, because if you want to spend 9 days in a leaky wall tent eating cardboard in a place that, like, there used to be a lot of elk, like, I got it, and I know the guys in that, right? You want to go to you want to go to a $10 million lodge and drink a $300 bottle of scotch every night, it's like
you got
this
that
massive raw topic. And so when guys are like, I've been dreaming about an elk hunt, it's like, okay, well, I got about 20 questions I need to ask you before we can really nail down, like, what, like, is it wall tents and horses? Is it lodge base? Is it something about the caliber of bulls? Is it archery? Is it rifle? And hopefully at the end of it, based on what their goals are and this hunt that they've dreamed up, like, we can be like, okay, like, this guy over here in this state, like, this is his run of the mill. Like, this is what he does every day, hunt in and hunt out. And that's such a better fit than, like, I'll give you another example, like, of a scenario, like when guys call us, right? Like, what's the breaking point where they call us? They'll draw a tag somewhere, or maybe even buy an over-the-counter tag or something like that, and they'll call up an outfitter and they'll say, okay, I would like to come elk hunting. It looks like you guys kill some really great bulls. When we go, what are we on horses? Are we on four-wheelers, or what are we doing? And the guy's like, well, we usually just drive around in the trucks and glass to different places and whatnot. And the guy's like, man, I was really kind of hoping for a horseback type experience. And the guy's like, well, I got a buddy. He's got a few horses. I'm sure we could get that done, right? And then the guy's like, well, what do you stay in? Like, what's your accommodations? And the guy's like, we've got camping trailers. Like, we have a couple of nice camping trailers, and they're warm and dry, and it's nice. And the guy's like, man, that was really what I was dreaming of, is more of like a lodge base or cabin base kind of thing where we're riding the horses out of the cabin. And the guy's like, well, I have a Airbnb or a buddy, or like, I think I could accomplish that. We can make that happen, right? And the unfortunate reality is the outfitter, he's just trying to say yes. He's running a business. He's trying to say yes and be as accommodating as he can for what the guy wants. Unbeknownst to the hunter is he has pulled that outfitter way outside of what his normal success has come from, and put him in a position where he's not comfortable. He's doing something different than he normally does. And then if it doesn't go well, he's like, man, that guy sucks. And it's like, And I think that, so then if you're able to have a conversation with like an unbiased entity, you're capable of like really talking about what the goal, what the vision, what the dream is, and then be like, okay, I think this is a good fit. Like if this is what this guy does every day, all year long, and they have a good track record within that, and or what you just described to me doesn't exist, right? Like that definitely happens. Like let's take a step back. What you're asking for is a little bit outside of what is reality. So let's refine it a little bit and see if it's still a good fit. And if it's not, then so be it. But at least having somebody that's like, no, that doesn't exist, but this does, and this is about as close as I know of to what you're asking for. And then it leaves it back on to the hunter to decide, okay, that's still palatable. I would still, that still sounds fun. And then they show up without false expectations and all things considered. And I would even transcend that into DIY, right? Like, It doesn't have to be a guided example. Like I could go on for 20 minutes about like examples of guys getting themselves into situations that they didn't quite understand, that if they would have just had just a 5-minute phone call, they could have been pointed a little bit different way and probably had a lot more fun, and the probability of success would have been a lot higher with just a little bit of coaching.
That's me, and everybody knows about my debacle in South Dakota. So literally, no, for real. And I'm listening to you, and I'm like, you know what, boy, this sure would come in handy. A lot of my listeners are DIYers. A lot of them are solo hunters, and there's a good segment that are female solo hunters, so add in that as well. I've been with terrible outfitters because I was a girl. For no other reason than because they just weren't happy to have a female in their camp. Like they assumed I was going to bring my husband or boyfriend or whatever. But even taking the female aspect out of it aside, I know a lot of outfitters aren't real interested in just taking one person, period, because it's just not worth it to them. So I think that a service like yours probably would have saved me many, many dollars, many tears, many, many hours of bitching and moaning about how frustrated I was, because you probably would have put me with a better fit.
And with conversations before we ever said yes, maybe all parties saying yes.
Right.
Of like, hey, this is what we're doing. And it creates a scenario where I can be this voice in the middle without the awkwardness that some of those conversations can be directly, right? It's like, hey, this needs to be covered. And yet it can be awkward to cover it, but it's not for me. It's like I can, and maybe some of that is just because of, like say, so many of these guys, like, I've been consulting now full time for 9 years, and it's like these relationships. Lots of them are very long. Where I'm not even calling quote unquote an outfitter. I'm calling my buddy. I'm like, hey, just so you know, like this is I want to make sure that you understand what we're saying yes to and what this all entails. And I'm sure you would feel the same way. Like I would 100 times rather he tell me right then, dude, I got a group of guys that are scheduled that week coming in that I've hunted with like 3 years in a row, and these guys are rough like that.
Yep,
like
totally.
This is not going to be a good fit. Like let me do it a week later. Or I've even had guys like, I have one example. I won't name names, but I have an outfit that I worked with for a few years when I was at Cabelas that was in Newfoundland. And it was like this super affordable lodge-based moose hunt in Newfoundland. It was like $4,000 back in the day. It was, and they didn't kill very big bulls at all, but I got lots of phone calls because the price point was incredible for a chance to go, check the box on a moose. And the outfitter, like, I can remember very clearly having conversations like, hey, this is who's calling. This is what and it wasn't even, it was just an observer. And he was like, absolutely not. No, this is not like, and he just, and there's no question it caught me off guard, first of all. And second of all, I was frustrated about it, but like looking back,
in the end, yeah,
way better. I'd rather find out right then so I can shift gears and we can go a different direction than having that a phone call after the fact. It's like, well, what a bunch of crap that was.
Yes,
right? Like,
been there.
Yeah, and how much? I mean, it's not even the money's part of it, but the time, and I think just like anybody, if you plan something, whether it is DIY or guided, and then you run into like variables like that, like it's different than even just having a tough hunt. It's like such a dejecting.
Oh, it takes the winds right out of your sails. Yes.
Yeah, you're like this is so, and it had nothing to do with even necessarily the money. It's like I've been looking forward to this. I've been losing sleep over this, and then I end up in a place that, I got one of my favorite guys. Like like it took me probably 3 years to get. I don't know if he's one of my favorite. He's probably one of my favorites. Like it took me probably like 3 years to get to this conclusion with this guy. And the conclusion is that, and he's in Western Wyoming, he cares. He genuinely cares a lot about the guys and the people that I send with him. That being said, this guy, his 5-year-old will say things to me that after 8 years in the military make me cringe. Like we're talking rank on a level that I've heard out of few
right.
GI's mouths. Like it is something to behold. Like the way they articulate the cuss words and the thing, like it's just like, man, you are next level, like 100%. And so oddly enough, or as you can imagine, I still have guys that it's like I've gotten to know them enough that I'm like, you know what, this is actually probably going to be a pretty good fit. Like these guys are going to get along really well.
Just a bunch of dirty old men out there in the woods slogging through. Yep.
Right.
Gotcha.
Right. But if I know the guy's praying at lunch, like, nope, that's not going to work. Like this is
right.
Like, this is not going to be a good fit. And the longer I've got to sit in this chair, and the longer and the more opportunities I've had to help people, the more like you said, at the core of it all, especially if it's a guided deal, like I just need to feel confident that there's a genuine concern for the people that are coming. And if there is a genuine concern for their success and how much fun they're having and all of that, like there's somebody for everybody, right? But at the core of it all, and unfortunately, there are, I mean, lots of operations, lots of things out there. And I wouldn't even say I'm a pretty big fan of the outfitting industry, and that most are that way. But unfortunately, there are some that can cast a dark shadow. And this could even be worth noting. Like the ones that have a spot just because you called outside of like a state that you're randomly drawing. Right. So if you're randomly drawing, then those guys are like all hands on deck to get as many clients as they can every year. But if there is some like scenario where you can just choose to go hunting with that guy, and the first phone call, he's like, yeah, I've got room. Let's get you set up. Total red flag to me. Like that therein lies that, because there is such a high demand for good hunts in the country that even for me as an agent, if I'm looking at getting set up with somebody new, like I would rather be told, you know what, dude, we are so busy. Like I have no need for you or your clients or anything. Like I'm 3 years deep. Like immediately I'm hungry. Like I need to find a way to inject myself into that and get some of my guys in the mix of it, because that's who I wanted. Like he wouldn't have that high of a repeat business if he was anything other than outstanding.
Yeah.
Right. But the guy that you call that's like, oh, you want to come and do this, and I've got these dates and these dates and these dates, and when do you want to come? Like for me, like I've done this a long time. That's a red flag. That's somebody that I'm like, I would rather have a guy that's like, listen, I can get you on the books, but it's going to be 3 years out. Like, okay, that's boom. That is somebody that I want to get to know a lot better, versus the guy that's like, well, I've got 6 different openings right now. What would you like?
Yeah,
and
that actually makes sense.
right? Like especially, and it really manifested, I would argue, in the last couple of years, right? With Canada being shut down with COVID and stuff, like there was such an intensity for good hunts that if you were decent, you were booked up solid. Like there was such an intensity and an influx of guys who I think, I don't even know that I would have ever quite dreamed up the volume of guys that were going hunting in Canada, bears, whitetails, whatever, each year. And yet we saw it 100% when they shut everything down. And then again, even more of a red flag if the guy's like, yeah, sure, I've got openings. Yeah. It's like, really? Because nobody has openings. So why do you have openings? Like that,
yeah, totally.
It's not necessarily a positive thing when they're just like, yeah, we're wide open. What would you like to do? It's like,
well, legitimately, yeah. Yep, legitimately. Late last fall or something like that, it was a newer outfit. They'd been out maybe open for 2 or 3 years, and it was Nebraska whitetail, I think it was. And when I messaged them, it was like a really, really inexpensive, which, number one, I've learned over the years that saving $1 is the dumbest thing you can do. Trust me, pay the extra fucking $500 because you will end up so screwed if you don't. Literally. So the price point was really low to begin with, right? So then I messaged them and I was like, oh, yeah, well, we're taking deposits or whatever. And I'm like, well, I'll contact you after the first of the year, but you'll probably be booked up. And they're like, no, I doubt it. And I was like, oh,
No kidding, huh?
Well,
yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and pass right now. Just right now, the price was way too low. You know what I mean? It's too good to be true. It is. And the fact that you're not having people screaming to get in at that price point, I'm like,
something's up.
You know? Like, seriously.
And it's too bad, right? But because I think that occasionally you'll see like an up-and-comer that maybe hasn't got good mentoring and doesn't understand that he's putting himself at a disadvantage of being less expensive, or especially a lot less expensive. And every once in a while you'll find a wrinkle in there that's good and it's exciting when you do. But usually the hunting industry, whether it's taxidermy, whether it's outfitting, like a lot of things, like it, unfortunately, I would even say, you get what you pay for.
You do. You really do.
Yeah.
Pay the extra couple of dollars. Go DoorDash for a day or two to make the extra. Seriously, come up with the extra cash.
Yeah.
But you know what? That's a good segue, though, into speaking of the money part of things. So, I mean, obviously, Cabelas and I have a very good working relationship. It never occurred to me to call one of the consultants to look for a hunt because I always thought that was like the rich man thing to do. And I'm just the average gal with average dollars in the bank, and I can't afford a $25,000 hunt or whatever. And I guess I always thought that those services would be priced, with a higher price tag to even just talk to me. So from what you explained earlier, you guys do charge some sort of, you have to be profitable. So how does that part of it work?
Sure. So, and I would even take one step back and then I'll answer that question.
Okay.
Like what I would say and maybe what has led you to that conclusion that you've come to about consulting companies and whatnot. And I would even go as far as to say that I think that I would love to sit here and say that we're the only ones like this. But I think that there is even a bit of a fundamental change happening across the board. I feel like we have sparked this a little bit because of kind of a change in thought process and our interest in helping DIY guys and things of that nature. But the truth of the matter is back when like Greg Severinsen at Cabelas and George Tolman at USO and Garth Carter at Hunting Pool and those guys, like they designed these companies as an idea of putting people in for hunts. The reason that they did it wasn't to gain monetarily from submitting the applications as much as maintaining control and of groups of guys that were applying in these places so that when they drew a hunt, they could book them on the hunt. And then just like maybe something that isn't talked about a whole lot, like how do companies like ours make money for booking hunts? We commission the outfitters. So their price is our price. or it should be, and then we charge them a percentage of whatever the cost of the hunt is. So whatever they've got listed on the website is what we sell it for, and it becomes a cost that is incurred, like a marketing expense from the outfitter, not an additional cost getting tacked on from a consulting agency. A real booking agency, that's how the arrangements and that's how the agreements should work. So it's not an additional expense to be working. I don't think anybody would do it if it costs them more just to have somebody point them in the right direction, or not very many people would do it. But that was the agenda. Get guys to apply, know that they drew, and be the first guy to tell them they drew so that they can start kind of directing traffic to these different places and they can make money, right? I think where we really differed in one of the visions we had coming into it is, I think even just for ourselves, like I've been on a lot of guided hunts, like probably more than I ever dreamed I would, but I still really enjoy. I mean, I did 3 DIY hunts this year with my wife and my son, and I go as often as I can with my brothers, and I went on one guided one this year, right? So I think that the game is complex enough that there's a ton of need, even if a guy knows he's just going to go DIY, to have somebody take their hand and help them understand, again, what states to apply for based on what their goals are, so that they're not just throwing a handful of darts at the wall every year and hoping a hunt falls out, right?
Yeah.
Like there's an actual plan in place that we're executing, not just the randomness of it. And so, like, our agenda is different because I don't, like, if I judge the health of my company very much on the number of applications we're submitting versus, like, how many hunts we're booking, right? And so to answer your question, like, what does it cost? Like, how do we make the money? When we decide what we're going to do and what applications we're going to submit, then we charge per application, and we do that with 2 different kind of customer experiences. One of them is what we call the non-floated hunt plan, and the non-floated hunt plan says that we're going to pay $45 per application, and we figure out all the applications we're going to submit, and we total that $45 up times however many applications, and if it's 1, great, got lots of guys doing that. If it's 10, so be it. It was whatever lines up with their goals, their budget, all of that, and we charge that on the front end. And then we simply have their credit card on file, and as we approach those state deadlines, then our girls are in there actually submitting those applications for that person. They're logging onto the websites, building profiles if they need to, picking the selections that have been decided upon with each and every hunter, and actually submitting that. So any subsequent charges past locking into the hunt plan would come directly from whatever states we're submitting applications for. And then on the flip side of that, we have the floated hunt plan. And the floated hunt plan is, I would say, very situational on when it makes sense to guys and when it doesn't. But what it boils down to is that it becomes a one-time charge out per year. We charge $27 per application instead of $45, but we grab the hunting licenses, the application fee, our service fees, and we total all that up into one number, and then we have a one transaction per year that grabs everything all at once, and now there's no subsequent charges going on their credit card. It actually all happens on our card. The one last piece of the floated plan, and why some guys do it, is like there are a few states out there like New Mexico, Wyoming, Idaho has some stuff like this, Kansas, Iowa. They all require the cost of the tag up front just to get your name in the hat. So let's just use let's use New Mexico as an example. We charge 9% of the cost of the tag plus the $27 if the application requires upfront money. So if they want to get in for elk, that would be a $760 tag. The 9% of 760 is $68.40. So they would pay us $68.40 plus the $27 application fee and $79 in hunting licenses, a $13 application fee, comes out to $182.40, and they're in that New Mexico draw. None of that's refundable, but they're in it. And when we submit the application, $79 hunting license, kind of more of a through money kind of thing, $13 application fee, and then we put the $760 on our credit card instead of the customers. And then if they're successful drawing the tag, then we square up on that $760. And one state, one species like that in New Mexico, more often than not, it's probably a good idea to just put it on your own credit card. They're going to tie it up for about 45 days, and you're going to get it back. But if we get into, let's say we want to do deer, elk, antelope, oryx, ibex, bighorn sheep, right? Like, it wouldn't take much for all of a sudden now there's $8,000 that we need to put up front just to have our name in the hat. We're going to get it all back if we don't draw anything, but we're going to tie up about $8,000. If we add sheep and moose in Wyoming, we're going to add another $4,000 or $5,000 to that. If we add a sheep or a moose in Idaho, we're going to add another $2,500 to that. So for guys that end up being real aggressive about some of this stuff, that floated program becomes a very glaring choice, that they don't have to tie up those large sums of money for any amount of time. Like, they pay us the 9%, and then it gets submitted, and then the last piece of the floated program that really starts to glare, and this goes for floated and non-floated, but especially if we're applying in states that do require the money up front, our Kids Apply Free program really goes very well hand in hand with the floated program, because if we have the adult in the program, it doesn't have to be a mirror image of what they're doing, but we do have some kind of parameters we have to operate around that. Essentially, if I can suffice what some of those parameters are with the bank, which doesn't take much, then I can put, even if the guy's got 3 or 4 kids, we're literally putting them in for nothing more than the cost of the hunting license and the application fee. There's no charges for our service fees. There's no float fees, and it becomes extremely valuable that maybe, like, I have one gentleman in Texas, this poor guy, well, maybe his wife. His wife is the poor person. She's had 3 sons. They're like 16, 14, and 10 right now.
Oh, my God.
The guy's done very well in his life. He has a great job, makes quite a bit of money. But even at that point, if he wants to just put his kids in just for New Mexico, it's like $70,000 for him. But within our program, I want to say he's spending all in and done like $1,000 or something like that. But we're going to put $70,000 up for him during that draw process, which gives his kids like maximum amount of chances to draw some tag somewhere. And so, again, the float's very situational on whether it's going to make sense for guys or not. A lot of times the non-float becomes a much more glaring side of things at $45 per application, and then it's a lot more progressive charge out throughout the entire application season. But our job is to just help you see kind of the Pepsi challenge, which one's better, put them head to head once we decide what applications we're doing, and then move forward, whichever makes the most sense to the customer and their budget and what they're trying to accomplish. So that is how we make our money here. The calls are free, consultations are free. But when, like I said at the beginning, we're a service company. Like, people pay us to perform a task for them, and that's how we figure out how much it costs for us to do whatever it is that we're doing for them. And it's, like I said, it's so far so good. It's amazing.
Awesome.
The phone rings a lot, and we were able to help a lot of guys and get them pointed in the right direction.
Very, very cool. So let's segue over, if you have time. I know we're like so far over time, it's not even funny. I'm going to have to cut this into like 2 parts. Which is fine.
Perfect.
But if you have time, I would like to go over like maybe the top 3 tips that you would maybe just highlight to say I call you up and I'm like, well, okay, can we back up a little bit? Because I still have other questions.
Yeah.
And this might be a quick question. So I'm tooling around on your website, right? And I really just love turkey hunting, and I've hunted a couple of times in South Dakota, and I've actually got skunked twice for turkeys, which I've had guests on who laugh at me, but whatever. So I see that you have an outfitter up there in South Dakota. What is the benefit of me going through this website? Because you only have one listed on the website, rather than just calling around, say, to, I don't know, just random outfitters in Google. I guess mostly it would be because you guys would probably determine if it's a good fit or not.
I think it's probably two things. I think, first of all, to your point, there is one, right? There's only one, and there's a reason there's only one. And coming off Cabelas, where we were probably booking a couple hundred turkey hunts a year in South Dakota, I definitely don't have near the volume of guys that I'm working with now. I don't have much of an interest in just sending them because they asked for it. I would rather, even if it took a year, to get them into that lodge. Like, I really believe in Brett and what he's doing, and I know they're going to be taken care of. And the second thing to that would be, and this kind of transcends lots of stuff, is I think another reason why guys and folks should consider working, whether it's with us or other entities like us, is that when you go on a hunt through somebody like us, you're not a one-off customer. You're not there. You're attached to a much bigger thing that with a lot of these outfits, if we're doing our job, we're bringing lots of value to them year after year after year. And so there's more at stake when you're at a destination attached to somebody like say, if it's us, great. If it's somebody else, I think the same thing would apply. That there's more at stake for those outfitters. You're part of something much bigger than just yourself. That there's a lot more attached, and there's a lot of unseen that you can't quantify just by being there hunting. That it matters to them. There's a need for that relationship to continue with us, and you just happen to be part of us. So does that make sense? Like you're not the one-off person anymore. That it's like if somebody's going to get the short straw, and there's 6 people at the table, it ain't going to be somebody from the draw. Like it's just not. But if you're there on your own accord, and you're not networked with somebody like us, then there is a chance. Not to say that happens all the time. Like I think maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but there is some truth to it. Like that, there is some value in being part of something that's bigger than just yourself. When you're with operations and things like that has some value because there's more at stake.
Gotcha. Yep, that makes sense. Totally makes sense.
Yep.
Okay, so say I call you up out of the blue, and I'm like, dude, I don't know where I want to go. What would be your number one tip? Be like, well, here's where you start.
So here's we covered a ton of ground. Yeah. I'm excited about it, but let me really shrink this down for you and your list. That I really believe in. I preach this all the time. That if you are the type of person that would love to hunt mule deer, antelope, and elk, right? And maybe it's more of check the box than getting into it. Getting into it means we need to expand a little bit. It's probably a lot less than people understand. But cost versus value, hands down, no question asked, you should be building points in Wyoming for deer, elk, and antelope. It's going to cost you $127.11. With about 4 or 5 points, you can hunt about half the state of Wyoming with that number of points for elk. 4 or 5 points for elk, you've got about half the state at your fingertips. You can choose to go DIY. You could choose to go guided. You could be on big private ranches. You could be public land. You could be down in the sagebrush or out on the pine ridges, or you could be up in the above timberline. There is something for everybody, and with about 5 points, you'll be at a finish line that would allow you to do that. It costs you $53.30 a year to build that momentum. The deer and the antelope, if you knew you were going to go guided, then with 1 point, there are loads of options. There are lots of places in the eastern side of Wyoming that the number of points that are required to go are not a reflection of the quality of animals that exist. They are very much a reflection of how much private property exists. Some of these units are entirely private property. So no one is applying for them unless they have a plan with whoever's operating in there. So it keeps the number of points required at an absolute minimum that with 1 point we should be guaranteed the ability to go on the deer or the mule or the deer or the antelope hunt. If you know you want to go guided, again, the number of points that it requires to draw are much stronger, especially for deer and antelope, a reflection of how much public land is there. I would tell you probably then at that point, if it's purely DIY, in order to have a good experience, and if you can't wait and you just got to go, I know we can help you even with 1 point, 2 points, and we'll explain what you're really saying yes to before we jump in that. But even just very safely, 5 points across the board, deer, elk, and antelope, you would be able to go DIY hunting, and I believe very strongly have good success if you would just get started. And again, the goal is DIY. 5 years, you would have the option on which one did you want to do first, second, third. So, and if we knew we were going guided, then even faster than that. Or if we knew we were okay going into areas that we're just literally going to have our Onyx in our hand all day long, watching where we're at and what we're doing, then sure, fine, let's go. We can do it with 1 point. And so the turnaround there is so quick, and it can fit the goals of so many folks that I would argue strongly that if guys want to go and they'll just kind of get that jump rope swinging, all you're doing is deer, elk, and antelope in Wyoming for $127.11 a year to build those points, and then pick and choose which one you want to go on after 5 years. You can do a lot of cool hunting just inside those applications. If you're more inclined to do like elk hunt a year, we really probably don't need to expand much. We get into Colorado, we get into Montana, we stay in Wyoming, and we start rolling the dice in New Mexico occasionally when we know we're not at some finish line in one of these other states. But it doesn't have to be this plan that is like, okay, well, if I'm going to do what this guy says, I got to put in 30 applications a year, and I have my short-term goals and my long-term goals and all of that. No way. I think I can accomplish most guys' goals that they can hunt every year for the next 10 years with no more than about 4 or 5 applications. And if they decide to expand on that, get a little more dangerous, we do a little more, so be it. But I can stay right within their goals with nothing more than 4 or 5 applications. And the foundation for 99% of guys out there should be building points in Wyoming. They can pick and choose when they want to hunt. They can know that they're going to draw when the time comes, and the cost versus value of getting those points is as good as anywhere in the country. Do that, perfect, and you're off on the right track.
That is like the perfect way to sum this episode up. Absolutely fabulous. Holy cow.
Yep.
So much information in this episode. I can't even thank you enough.
I'm excited. It was fun.
I know. Sure. And you can hear the excitement. Like, I could listen to you talk about this stuff for probably 8 hours and not get tired of it. Seriously.
I'm a very long-winded guy.
That's okay, though.
Tell your listeners, like, if they get on the phone with me, I'm like the most long-winded human on the planet. My guys are a lot more. They're going to get you from point A to point B a lot faster than I am.
That's okay. Usually my episodes are like 30 minutes, or I break them up. I'm like, nope, I'm just going to post it all and be done with it. So, good stuff, Jordan. Seriously, thank you for coming on and explaining a lot of this stuff to us.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell the listeners where they can find out about you, your website, and your podcast?
Perfect, yeah. Podcast, we need to put some more momentum in that thing. I've got to make time. This time of year, so we're just inundated with calls and whatnot. But we're going to. It's like part of my New Year's resolution. So where to find us? thedraw.com. Obviously, should give you hours of reading to do that maybe it'll just end up confusing you more. Or I hope it's written well. that's good. But there's lots of stuff on there to cruise around. If it's more like I just want to, like, I want to get a consultant on the phone, I want to talk to these guys about this, then right when you land on the landing page at thedraw.com, you'll see a great big button that says apply for hunts today. It'll ask you for some information. You'll submit it. You'll fill all of those blanks in. You'll hit submit, and we will get somebody on the phone as fast as we can with you to kind of go over the notes and the information that you submitted there. And then if you're maybe even more curious and just want to kind of watch us from a distance for a minute, I would definitely encourage, if guys have an Instagram account, follow us. It's at We Are The Draw. And then we also have a Facebook at The Draw. We're trying to get a little YouTube channel thing going. There's some cool stuff on there, but it's the consistency that we're posting on the YouTube channel and the podcast is probably, it's not what I'm dreaming up at this point. I gotta figure out how to slow the phone down a little bit so we have time for some of that stuff. But it's like I said, extremely humbling. But check us out on Instagram at We Are The Draw. And if you know you'd like to get on the phone with somebody and have a conversation, go to the website, hit the apply for hunts today, fill that stuff out, and hit submit, and you'll get either me or Jared or Casey, Caleb, Gilbert. It doesn't matter. These guys are absolute freight trains in how much they know.
Wonderful. Well, I literally am probably just going to go ahead and check out the Wyoming Draw stuff now that we're done with this
there
episode.
You go. Good. I'm glad. It is, like you say, if somebody calls me up and they're like, I've killed a pile of everything, I want a 200-inch mule deer, I want a 400-inch elk, like Wyoming ain't going to be a good fit. But if it's like, I want to shoot quality animals and be able to do it in a timely manner, like Wyoming is perfect. It's so great. Yeah.
Awesome. Very, very cool. Jordan, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yes.
I will link to I'm going to try to link to everything that you mentioned in the show notes for people. And, of course, link back to your website so that they can just contact you guys directly if they have questions after listening. So thank you so much.
Yep. Very good. Yep. Let me know if you need it all as well. And I'm excited. Thank you for the opportunity very much.
Totally. I'll tag you as soon as this goes live.